Hare Krishna. So today we're starting the 29th portion of our Bhagavad Gita section of the Bhakti Shastri course here at Iskana DC. And we're starting a new chapter, chapter 14. We're going to cover about the first half of it, verses 1 through 13. It's a continuation, an elaboration of what we learned in the previous chapter, 13. We learned there that we are souls in a sea of material nature. It was analyzed that there's the field, which is our bodies, our minds, our intelligence, our senses, our experiences, the world around us, and the knower of the field, and that's us, the soul, and the second knower, the Supreme Lord. And it was understood that we're two different things that don't really go together. And almost like oil and water don't mix. Spirit and matter don't really mix. But yet, there's this strange thing that happens that we keep going through birth after birth after birth associated with the field. And so it explained that we are more or less voluntarily connected. It's a guna sangasya. It said through close association or attraction to the qualities of the field, the experiences we have by interacting with the field, that we stay connected and attached, and we take birth after birth after birth. And it was mentioned, how we can extract ourselves from that situation. But here in this chapter, we're going to hear more about those gunas, the qualities that we are associating with, and we're going to find out that the qualities come, and they've been certain pre-packaged groups. We're going to hear three types of qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And so the different qualities, they're grouped together. Certain qualities go together, and we'll see how that affects us, how it affects our futures, how it affects our nature, how we can see how we're connected to these qualities in various ways. And that will help us also to extract ourselves. Okay? So that we'll begin here. Verse 1 is: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again, I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." So it sounds good. And Prabhupada says, if one understands this chapter through the process of philosophical speculation, he will come to an understanding of devotional service. This is something that we're going to find in this section of the Bhagavad Gita. That we mentioned how some commentators see this section, chapters 13 through 18, as being primarily about jnana, or knowledge, whereas the previous 6, 7 through 12 were particularly about bhakti. But it's the type of knowledge, or jnana, that either, as Prabhupada says here, brings us to devotional service, and if we already are in devotional service, it will help us in our practice in various ways. So that, there's a reason why Krishna includes these chapters. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, he says, in the 13th chapter, it was clearly explained that by humbly developing knowledge, one may possibly be freed from material entanglement. It has also been explained that it is due to association, this is what I just mentioned in the opening, it is due to association with the modes of nature that the living entity is entangled in this material world. So that's how this follows on that. We're going to hear about those modes of material nature and how they work more. And now in this chapter, the Supreme Personality explains what those modes of nature are, how they act, how they bind, and how they give liberation. So that's what we're going to hear here. Prabhupada sums it up very nicely there. And then he says, by understanding this knowledge, various great sages attained perfection and transferred to the spiritual world. Thus it is expected that one who understands this 14th chapter will attain perfection. So this is a good, a nice little introduction there to hopefully to get us excited about this material. And then he says, the knowledge explained in this chapter is proclaimed by the Supreme Lord to be superior to the knowledge given so far in other chapters. Lord now explains the same knowledge in a better way. And so I think that's the explanation here, because we've already heard before, how we had the most confidential knowledge. We heard about pure bhakti, in chapters 9 and the early part of 10, and it really doesn't get any better than that. So the thing that makes this better is being explained from a different angle that will help us in the practice of our pure bhakti. So that's what makes it better than everything else before. He gives us a new angle that will really be enlightening and help us. So here Prabhupada says, this is actually Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This is his commentary on this verse. He says, in the 14th chapter, the bondage caused by the gunas and its symptoms are described. The many symptoms of the disappearance of the gunas and the cause of disappearance, bhakti, are also described. In the previous chapter, it was described that the contact of the jiva with the body made of gunas is caused by his taking repeated births. Is the cause of his taking repeated births. Karanam guna sangosya sad asad yoni janmasu. That was chapter 13, text 22. What types of results come from contact with the gunas? What are the symptoms of those associated with the gunas? How is one liberated from the gunas? That's what we're going to hear here in chapter 14. And so again here in text 2, Krishna is giving us incentive and excitement here to read the chapter. He says, by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. What's he say? Sadharmam, same nature. Mama sadharmyam, my same nature. And that we'll hear that at the end of the chapter. That we'll cover next time, though. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So it sounds good. It's stuff worth knowing here. And then Prabhupada says, but actually in the spiritual sky, one attains a spiritual form. There are spiritual activities, and the spiritual situation is called devotional life. That atmosphere is said to be uncontaminated, and there one is equal in quality with the Supreme Lord. To obtain such knowledge, one must develop all the spiritual qualities. One who thus develops the spiritual qualities is not affected either by the creation or by the destruction of the material world. So here we're talking about the gunas, the material qualities, and Prabhupada says we have to obtain spiritual qualities. And then the Prabhupada says, it is understood from Vedic literature that the liberated souls who have reached the transcendental planets of the spiritual sky always look to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, being engaged in his transcendental loving service. So even after liberation, the devotees do not lose their individual identities. This is going to come into play also at the very end of the chapter when he talks about attaining a nature similar to his, and Brahma Bhuyaya, attaining the situation of Brahman. And so some people misunderstand that and think that you will merge into the Brahma Jyoti. That's the highest thing. And so Prabhupada is in the beginning and at the end of the chapter, he's going to mention that the highest state is to be in relationship with the Supreme. We've talked many times throughout the course of this Bhakti Shastri course about this, how people generally think that that the impersonal, formless they think that would be more absolute than something that has form, and we've explained many times how that's not really the case. Okay, so let's look here. It says, this is Baladeva Vibhushan's commentary. It says, the Lord states that many have attained this liberation. He says that the verb is in the plural case. Thus, this verse supports the idea that in liberation there are many jivas. So he's coming along the same tack as Srila Prabhupada here. This is also understood from the Shrutis, which say, Tad Vishnu Padamam Padam Sada Pashanti Surlayaha. The devotees, it says a plural case, always see the supreme form of Vishnu. So I think Prabhupada was, he followed quite a bit Baladeva Vibhushan in making his purports, and so I think he expanded on this in his. So by saying that it says one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own, so it seems that there was a plural case in there. So if we just merge, then that's it. There's only one of us. Cease to exist. So he's saying that there are a plural case, and in the liberated state, there's many devotees. And then in verse 3, we began to hear the topic, kind of before we had kind of a preamble there that helps to get us understand what's coming and make us excited to hear it. We hear it says, Krishna says, the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharat. And Prabhupada says, this is an explanation of the world. Everything that takes place is due to the combination of Kshetra and Kshetragya, field and the knower of the field, as we heard in chapter 13, the body and the spirit soul, Prabhupada says. This combination of material nature and the living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. And then he says, the Mahatattva is the total cause of the total cosmic manifestation and that total substance of the material cause, in which there are three modes of nature, is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Person impregnates that Brahman with the seeds of the living entities. So we're understanding here how that combination initially begins. So that the two have been combined, the knower of the field and the knower of the field keeps taking birth. How did it originally begin? Well, now at least we're told before that it was, went back, it was beginningless, or which really meant that it went back farther than you can calculate. And so here we're going back to the very beginning of the creations of the universe. And so it says actually what happens is there's periods when universes are created and destroyed, and then there's periods in between when there is no material creation. The jivas and the material nature enter into the body of Mahavishnu, and then at some point it starts again. So from that beginning, souls are entering into the material nature. So it goes all the way back, further than we can calculate. As explained in the 7th chapter, beyond this there is another superior nature, the living entity. Into material nature, the superior nature is mixed by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thereafter all living entities are born of this material nature. So here's how things begin. And Prabhupada says, the scorpion lays its eggs in piles of rice, and sometimes it is said that the scorpion is born out of rice. But the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. Prabhupada's getting into some old-time biology here. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of the living entities. The seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they only seem to come out as the products of material nature. It's interesting, Prabhupada is using something that was called spontaneous generation, an early theory of biology. And he's saying that the current notion of life originating from inanimate matter is a newer version of spontaneous generation. It says, so the jivas, they can't be a product of material nature since they are superior energy. This is according to the Bhagavad Gita. And it's funny, in early biology, it was sometimes thought that organisms could arise from matter, like that example of the scorpion that Prabhupada gave. Sometimes, if you have fruit, fruit flies seem to appear out of nowhere, but there are eggs in there. But at first, people didn't understand that, and they just thought that they would come out of things like that. Little, bugs or things would just could be spontaneously generated out of certain material circumstances, and so they called it. They didn't realize that there were eggs there that could lay there for a long time and hatch, and so that was the notion of spontaneous generation, which then biology proved wrong. But now he's saying that that it's a similar mistake is happening now when we think that life can arise from inanimate things. So he's suggesting that the current theory of life, that life originally came from a sophisticated combination of matter, and that living beings are simply such a thing, is a modern form of the old spontaneous generation theory. So it's interesting how he brings that up. He says we're still doing it. The biologists used to do it, and we're doing it again. Falling back into that mistake. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in order to explain how the contact of the jiva with the gunas through beginningless ignorance creates bondage, the Lord speaks about the method of appearance of the field and the knower of the field. The Supreme Lord's place of impregnation is Prakriti, called Mahat, what is great, because it extends through all place and time continuously. It is called Brahma because it is the cause of increase. The root is Brih. In some Shruti texts, Prakriti is referred to as Brahma. Here, that's what Krishna used in this particular text. Mahad Brahma. And Baladeva Vibhushan says, having thus praised the topic to be spoken in the first couple of verses, and producing taste for that in the hearer, the purpose of the first two verses, the Lord makes it clear in this verse that the Lord is the cause of the combination of Prakriti and Jiva. This combination was previously described in two verses, and you can look them up, Bhagavad Gita 7.4 and Bhagavad Gita 13.27. And then 14.4, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving Father. And that Prabhupada says, in this verse it is clearly explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original Father of all living entities. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet, even on the highest, where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth there are living entities, even within water and within fire. All these appearances are due to the mother, material nature, and Krishna's seed-giving process. The purport is that the material world is impregnated with living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation, according to their past deeds. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, not only at the time of creation of the universe is Prakriti the mother and I am the father, but at all times. Prakriti Mahad Brahma is the place of birth, the yoni, the mother of all those forms of moving and non-moving creatures which appear in all wombs from Davis to grass, and I am the giver of the seed. I am the father, the giver of the seed, the giver of the jivas. So yeah, it's not just at the very beginning of the universe, but those jivas are continuing to circulate. First he creates the world and the jivas inside them, and they're continuing to percolate through different forms, the same jivas, going through and taking different births. we've already heard before how the jiva is eternal and unchangeable. So once he impregnates material nature, they can keep taking newer and newer forms. We saw in chapter 2, like the changing of clothing. So he does it at the start, and he's still the Father all the way through to the end of the creation. In 14.5, and so here we're gonna talk about the gunas, the qualities, and how they're kind of packaged together in three discrete types. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. That's sattva, raja, and tama. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. And the word here, the word is nibadnanti, do condition. And there's the notion of being tied, bondage with that. The Prabhupada gives in 441 and 9.9 in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, do bind or bind. Here he gives the word condition. Prabhupada says, the living entity, because he is transcendental, has nothing to do with the material nature. Still, because he has become conditioned by the material world, he is acting under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because living entities have different kinds of bodies in terms of the different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. This is the cause of the varieties of happiness and distress. So when Prabhupada uses the word condition, it's not so much in terms of, there's the classical and operant conditioning, what B.F. Skinner and Pavlov. It's not so much that, is that it means we're placed under certain conditions. Like if in a contract you have certain conditions that you have to follow. So we are, transcendental, and we have our own spiritual form and spiritual life. But as we come into contact with different types of bodies, as Prabhupada says, because living entities have different kinds of bodies in terms of the different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. So when we have a certain body, we'll act in a certain way. The humans act differently than the mosquitoes, and mosquitoes act differently than the birds and whatnot. So even though the same soul is in all these different types of bodies, we don't know how many different forms we've taken. We've been in all different kinds of forms. Same soul, but the activities will be so much different. Our capabilities will be so much different. So we have certain conditions on our existence, limitations, and things things are defined in a certain way. So we're bound by that. We're limited by that. Some things are determined by that. And then there's the word here. There's the word avyayam, eternal, and Prabhupada says in the living entity is eternal. He says in the word for word translation, and there's also a lot of other kind of related terminology. It says immutable, imperishable, unchangeable, inexhaustible, everlasting, eternal, indestructible. So there's that immutable and unchangeable situation there. So it's interesting how the going through all these bodies doesn't change anything. The soul is the same, but while in contact with the body, and one body to another, there seems to be a big change. Their capabilities and limitations and possibilities are very limited and seem to change from one body to another. But intrinsically, there's no change in the soul. Let's see. The Vishwanacharya Thakur says, after the Lord has described the appearance of all the living entities through Prakriti and Purusha, how are the gunas to be described? What type of bondage arises for the jiva from association with these gunas? So this is what Krishna has said, that we come into the under the influence, and even though we're unchangeable and eternal, we take certain temporary forms and have certain type of temporary natures. And so he says, now Krishna is going to explain that more, how that happens, what it looks like, and what happens there. And we'll be able to recognize how the gunas are affecting us. But after this. So now he's going to describe them, starting with the mode of goodness, sattva. Krishna says, O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, prakashikam, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Right, so we said that there's that sangena. So he said by association, but not the conditions or binds. Right? And it's and the thing that causes us to be attracted, that makes us want to keep that connection going, right? Because the soul and the rest of the material creation, the body, the mind, the world around us, we have no real connection. But what is it that keeps us interested? Keeps us wanting to maintain that connection? Well, here it says, well, the mode of goodness is a sense of happiness and knowledge. That's what's attractive about the mode of goodness. And we'll hear more about that. Prabhupada says, the living entities conditioned by material nature are various types. One is happy, another is active, and another is helpless. This is a beautiful, very succinct description of persons who have predominantly mode of goodness, predominantly mode of passion, and predominantly mode of ignorance. Happy, active, and helpless. So that's very succinct. That's really beautiful. All these types of psychological manifestations are causes of the entity's conditioned status in nature. How they are differently conditioned is explained in this section of the Bhagavad Gita. So it's remember the mind, our power of understanding, the intelligence, our sense of self, the ego, false ego. These are all part of the field, all part of the material nature, all dealing with these modes of nature. So as we say, psychological manifestations. It's not just the physical body. That's the field. And then he says, the effect of developing the mode of goodness in the material world is that one becomes wiser. Now he's explaining here about how we're attracted by that, how we're bound by the knowledge and happiness. Is that one becomes wiser than those otherwise conditioned. A man in the mode of goodness is not so much affected by material miseries, and he has a sense of advancement in material knowledge. The representative type is the Brahmana, who is supposed to be situated in the mode of goodness. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, the difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel that he is advanced in knowledge and is better than others. A certain complacency comes in. The situation is good, everything is all right. I'm in a good situation. And of course, being an eternal spiritual entity in contact with changing temporary material nature is not a good situation. And so something that produces complacency and a certain false sense of satisfaction isn't helpful in that sense. And then Prabhupada explains further, because he mentioned the Brahmana. In the modern world, we don't have so many Brahmins, at least outside of India, and the ones there are not always in the mode of goodness. So he tries to make this relevant to our world here. He says that this sense of advanced happiness in conditioned life makes them bound by the mode of goodness of material nature. As such, they are attracted toward working in the mode of goodness. And as long as they have an attraction for working in that way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. Thus, there is no likelihood of liberation, so there's the downside here, or of being transferred to the spiritual world. Repeatedly, one may become a philosopher, a scientist, or a poet, and repeatedly become entangled in the same disadvantages of birth and death. But due to the illusion of the material energy, one thinks that that sort of life is pleasant. So he's talking in the mode of goodness. We'll hear more about it, but because people are relatively content and they have knowledge, they tend to gravitate towards kind of intellectual sorts of pursuits. They're not, because they're already happy, and they don't have to work so hard trying to produce things that will, bring them happiness. So in the mode of goodness, they tend to do things that are kind of useful in themselves. The starving artist type. So we'll see that there's also combinations of the modes. So not every starving artist is in the mode of goodness by a long shot. And then the word here, anamayam, here, without any sinful reaction. Also is given different places. In the second chapter, Prabhupada translates it as without miseries. Here, without sinful reaction. Of course, those things are connected. that when you have sinful reactions cause misery. And then in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, like, the health is all right. So there's it's a good situation comparatively, and we'll see also later on that the kind of lifestyle that they lead contributes to their good health. Because they're full of knowledge and happy, they tend to produce pious activities instead of impious activities. So this causes them to be without miseries compared to the others. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this verse describes how sattva guna binds the jiva. It is without distress, anamayam. It is peaceful. So that's why he translates anamayam as being without distress. The association of the jiva with happiness, which is the product of peacefulness, and the association of the jiva with knowledge, which is the product of illumination, prakashakam. So that this is that kind of illumination, that gives understanding and knowledge, not brightness of light. Produces the mistaken identity of I am happy, I am learned. So it says similar along the lines of what Prabhupada said previously, that they feel a little superior to others, they feel contented. And it makes them complacent in their circumstance. And then you see I'm quoting here from Bhagavad Gita 238. This is kind of action in the mode of goodness here. Krishna says, do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by so doing you shall never incur sin. So he's doing the right thing, not for the karmic reaction. Generally, people perform pious activities, do the right thing, so they can get a positive karmic result. But if you just do it for the sake, do it because it's the right thing. It says then there's no sinful activities from that. Elsewhere, Krishna will say that just like where there's a little smoke, where there's fire, there's always a little smoke. So even in doing the right thing, if you're looking for the result, the right thing always has a little bit of a drawback. So there's a little smoke along with the fire. So there's always a little bit of small sinful reaction to it. And so if you remove the desire for the result and just do it for the sake of doing the right thing, then no sins are occurred. So people who are living in the mode of goodness, they're doing things that will make their life pleasant in the immediate present, and they're also at least avoiding misery in the future, not creating some bad karma that's going to bring them misery. So it helps them in multiple ways. 14.7, the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti, and because of this the embodied living entity is bound to material fruit of actions. So this is the mode of passion, Rajaguna. So where there was happiness and knowledge, now there's something quite different. Unlimited desires and longings which make you want to try to fulfill them. So Prabhupada says, and when the mode of passion is increased, one develops the hankering for material enjoyment. He wants to enjoy sense gratification. For sense gratification, a man in the mode of passion wants some honor in society or in the nation, and he wants to have a happy family with nice children, wife, and house. These are the products of the mode of passion. As long as one is hankering after these things, he has to work very hard. And we'll see that's one of the drawbacks, one of the reasons why it's miserable. And then he says, therefore the whole material world is more or less in the mode of passion. Modern civilization is considered to be advanced in the standard of the mode of passion. That should be pretty obvious. You don't see so much contentment, you see a lot of hard work. Formerly, the advanced condition was considered to be in the mode of goodness. The Brahminical culture was the highest peak. And knowledge and contentment are good things. And it doesn't harm yourself, it doesn't harm the world around you. He says, if there is no liberation for those in the mode of goodness, what to speak of those who are entangled in the mode of passion? So it's worse. And then Prabhupada says, the mode of passion is characterized by the attraction between man and woman. Woman has attraction for man, and man has attraction for woman. This is called the mode of passion. Just like when we talked about kama or lust, this is kind of like the ultimate example, the archetype example of it. But it also that it can be any kind of desires. That's kind of the essence of them all. But it just in general it means all different types of desires that they may have. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, know that Rajoguna consists of attraction, ragatmakam. When one does not obtain one's desired objects, one develops desire, trishna. And when one obtains one's desired objects, one develops attachment, sangha. Rajoguna gives rise to these two. Rajoguna binds up the soul, the dehinam, by attachment, sangena, to actions, in quest of present and future goals. Attachment to action arises by desire and attachment, trishna and sangha. So that's pretty clear. That's how the activity is related to the desire and attraction. There's a certain optimism that's there in Rajaguna. That I'm not feeling happy, I have so many desires, but I think I can do something about it. I have a way to fulfill everything. I can make myself happy. In the mode of goodness, the happiness is just there as a byproduct. 4.8, O son of Bharata, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. There's pramada, alasya, and nidrabi. Madness, indolence, and sleep. We'll look a little bit at this. There's Prabhupada translates pramada as madness, and it certainly can be insanity, but there's also some other meanings there that kind of give you maybe a more rounded understanding we'll talk about. And Prabhupada says, in this verse, the specific application of the word tu is very significant. This means that the mode of ignorance is a very peculiar qualification of the embodied soul. The mode of ignorance is just the opposite of the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, by development of knowledge, one can understand what is what. But the mode of ignorance is just the opposite. Everyone under the spell of the mode of ignorance becomes mad, and a madman cannot understand what is what. Instead of making advancement, one becomes degraded. And then he says, such people are very lazy. When they are invited to associate for spiritual understanding, they are not much interested. They are not even active like the man who is controlled by the mode of passion. Thus, another symptom of one embodied in the mode of ignorance is that he sleeps more than is required. And then Prabhupada says, such a man appears to be always dejected and is addicted to intoxicants and sleeping. These are the symptoms of a person conditioned by the mode of ignorance. So we can see, I think, that there's a kind of overarching attitude that comes with these modes. There's a certain contentment in the mode of goodness. I think we're going to hear later on how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that somebody in the mode of goodness is feeling actually some of the intrinsic happiness of the soul. So there's just a natural satisfaction that's there, and an understanding that comes with it. And in the mode of passion, so there's this real feeling of a certain incompleteness and a lacking, but they have this optimism that they can do something about it. If I only get this, if I make this plan and work this way, then I can get the things I need so that I can attain happiness. So they're looking to the future, but they have optimism, so they're willing to wait, and put in lots of hard work, for years at a time to make their life what they wish it to be. And then in ignorance, you can see this discouragement. Right? He says that they're dejected and addicted to intoxicants and sleeping, so they also are unhappy, very, very unhappy, but they don't feel this optimism that they can change it. So really discouraged, really dejected, and addicted to intoxicants and sleeping. They're trying to escape the pain. It's painful. They don't know how to do it in a way like the people in the mode of passion do. They don't see how they can become happy. They don't think it's going to work. Nothing ever works. There's no hope. It's just this world. Life is miserable. The world is miserable. They want to try to kill the pain. So there's escapism is a real fundamental part of their outlook. And then the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Mohanam means confusion or error, and pramada, this is, he says, means inattention. That's kind of the literal translation. Alasya means lack of effort. Nidra means sleep arising from lack of energy in the consciousness. Right? If you're discouraged, you think everything is hopeless. Right? You feel that way. Oh, what's the use of trying, if anything? What's the use, That's what it is. And the inattention just means, one of the things they'll say is, Baladev Bhadrabhushan says, pramada means the careless tendency to perform actions which should not be done. Oh, why can you worry about all these rules and regulations? It's just so hard. Just, just eat that thing or just do this thing. It's just too much work to worry about that. And Prabhupada, usually he translates pramada as madness, but in the Srimad Bhagavatam he says it's due to negligence, pramadena. So he also understands that notion of inattention or being negligent. So there's a whole, so you can go all the way to insanity, for sure. That's a form of escapism sometimes. But also it can just mean inattention, negligence. It fits in with the rest of the profile. 9, O son of Bharata, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruitive action, and ignorance covering one's knowledge binds one to madness. A little summary there. And Prabhupada says, a person in the mode of goodness is satisfied by his work or intellectual pursuit. And here he comes back to that. Just as a philosopher, scientist, or educator may be engaged in a particular field of knowledge and may be satisfied in that way. So he's satisfied by his work. The work itself is satisfying, not the hopeful result of the work. The work may be miserable, but you're looking for something, some good result to come from it. So he says, I said today we don't have so many brahmanas, so he has the kind of contemporary examples of philosopher, scientist, or educator may be engaged in a particular field of knowledge and may be satisfied in that way. A man in the mode of passion may be engaged in fruitive activity. He owns as much as he can and spends for good causes. Sometimes he tries to open hospitals, to give charity, to give to charity institutions, etc. These are signs of the one in the mode of passion. So you're saying that here he's saying that somebody in the mode of passion, at least they may still do some benefit for others. The mode of goodness, they're trying to do something that's good. It's the activity itself is satisfying to them, and if it's good philosophy, I suppose, or good science, or good education, it may be something useful for others. Art, as you mentioned before. Whereas the work for somebody in the mode of passion, it may not be very pleasant. It's just goal-oriented sort of stuff, but still, if they're successful enough, then they may give some to others, and so it may be beneficial. And he says, these are signs of one in the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance covers knowledge. In the mode of ignorance, whatever one does is good neither for him nor for anyone. So, it's just a lose-lose situation. Anything with the mode of ignorance we'll see is just a total loss. We understand people act foolishly. What good can come of it? So 410, sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance. O son of Bharata, sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at the other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way there is always competition for supremacy. So we're going to find a couple of different things that because if you reflect on yourself, I think you should probably be able to see all of these things happening, at some time or another, sometimes almost all at once. And but we'll see that sometimes we're more one way than the other. And so that's what it's saying. There's usually mixtures of the modes, but they also don't stay in the same proportion. Even it says, sometimes the early morning, is supposed to be more conducive to the mode of goodness. It's just why we do spiritual activities in the morning, and later on it becomes more passionate, and nighttime is more ignorance. So even the time of day we can feel different, and of course by our activities. So it says that we're usually affected by all of them. And the proportion of one or the other can change over time, and even very quickly they can change through the course of a day. And so Prabhupada says here, he says, the prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifested in one's dealings, in his activities, in eating, etc. All this will be explained in later chapters. We're going to hear more about this as we go on. Chapter 18 is going to have quite a bit about it. We're going to get some more details, actually. And some of these things here, eatings and other such things. But if one wants, Prabhupada says, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the modes of ignorance and passion. One can similarly develop the mode of passion and defeat goodness and ignorance, or one can develop the mode of ignorance and defeat goodness and passion. So our endeavors can influence those proportions. And I guess you won't have to take more than one guess to see which one we should try to cultivate and develop. Pretty plain which one is the most beneficial. Prabhupada will tell us that explicitly, though, just in case we can't guess. And then Prabhupada says, if one is determined he can be blessed by the mode of goodness, if one is determined, he can be blessed by the mode of goodness. And by transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in pure goodness, which is called the Vasudeva state, a state in which one can understand the science of God. By the manifestation of particular activities, it can be understood in what mode of nature one is situated. So Prabhupada will say this later again. We already heard it right in the very beginning of Nectar of Instruction, where he advised us to come to the mode of goodness. After which everything that we need to know to make further spiritual progress will be revealed. So he's going to say that again also, that we should really try to come to the mode of goodness, and then that's kind of the stepping off place for transcendence, as he indicates here. By transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in pure goodness, which is called the Vasudeva state, a state in which one can understand the science of God. And then Baladev Bhushan says, the nature of the gunas is that they appear and disappear according to the operation or exhaustion of old karmas. So the natural fluctuations are partially due to our karma. It's interesting how he says the operation or exhaustion of old karmas. And so that's one reason why it's they fluctuate back and forth. But Prabhupada says we can also try to cultivate our current karmas, can help us to be more established in the mode of goodness, or the others, but we shouldn't want to do that. And in text 11, the manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. Again, prakasha. So that's how you can recognize that one. And he says, Prabhupada says, there are 9 gates in the body: 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, the mouth, the genitals, and the anus. When every gate is illuminated by the symptoms of goodness, it should be understood that one has developed the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one can see things in the right position. One can hear things in the right position. And one can taste things in the right position. One becomes cleansed inside and outside. In every gate there is development of the symptoms of happiness, and that is the position of goodness. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, when illumination or knowledge, real awareness of things through the sound of the Vedas, appears in all the doors, such as the ears, one should understand that there is an increase in sattva through such symptoms of knowledge. And here's where he says, the word utta also indicates that there will also be an appearance of happiness arising from the soul. So it gives the impression that we use all of these things in the appropriate way. Right? So Prabhupada says they can one can see things in the right position, hear things in the right position, and can taste things in the right position. If there's some understanding of spiritual life, we've already understood how we can see Krishna in everything. We in the mode of passion, where all of our perceptions are really covered by our desires. Even in the legal system, a judge who's supposed to, their profession is to be fair and to have good judgment. That's a judge, they call him a judge. Will recuse themselves if they have a conflict of interest in a particular case. And even if they really try, and they'll do that, because even if they really try to see things objectively, if they have some interest in the outcome, there's been all these patent battles between Apple and Samsung. If the judge owns a whole bunch of stock in one of the companies, the person's just going to feel that the arguments from that side are just more persuasive. It's hard to be objective in that way. So we look at things. We look at things in the mode of passion through our desires. we see something that can fulfill our desires, we want that. We see, someone who might be a rival for that, we don't like them. It's just we can't see things objectively. It's all colored by our desires and our needs and our objectives. We see others that way. I guess that's a big one. We have our friends and our enemies. In the mode of goodness, you see people. You understand to some degree that you're a soul, and you understand how others are the same spiritual kind of entity. And because of your happiness, you can be quite neutral in that way. You can easily be the well-wisher of others. Or everything in the mode of passion is how does this next person relate to my success or failure? And if they don't relate to my desires, then they're irrelevant. So you have your friends that are helping you, your co-workers, your colleagues, your family, and you have those who are working against you. A friend and foe is a real thing. And you can't see them as spiritual beings very easily. And of course, in the mode of ignorance, you just do anything. Just do whatever is, they used to say back in the 60s, if it feels good, do it. It's kind of like that. You can't see what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. You just don't care. So in the mode of goodness, you see things as they are. You use your resources in the appropriate ways. So then it goes on. He goes on, Krishna in 12 to say, O chief of the Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, fruit of activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. And here Prabhupada says, one in the mode of passion is never satisfied with the position he has already acquired. He hankers to increase his position. If he wants to construct a residential house, he tries his best to have a palatial house, as if he would be able to reside in that house eternally. And he develops a great hankering for sense gratification. There is no end to sense gratification. He always wants to remain with his family and in his house and to continue the process of sense gratification. There is no cessation of this. All these symptoms should be understood as characteristic of the mode of passion. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says greed, absorption in various endeavors, he says pravritti, effort in actions such as building a house and the non-cessation of enjoyment of objects and desire appear with the increase of rajas. So you can see how this binds you. Right? That this feeling that you're just not happy. But the happiness is out there. It's out there if you can just, do the right things, if you can just be persistent and smart enough, if you can just work hard enough. You can, it's a constant living for the future. I think you can see that in of course in our lives and in our world, how much people live for the future. Yes, things might be tough right now. My job's not so great, the boss is terrible, but when I climb up the ladder, or when this happens, I have a plan, and then I'm going to do this and this and this, and then the happiness will be mine. There's that inner optimism, and you have patience enough to wait. That's the interesting thing about the mode of passion. There's some level of patience. You can work hard, you can accept the difficulties and austerities for something that's coming in the future. In the mode of goodness, you're already feeling happy. But in the mode of ignorance, you can't wait. It's just too hard. You don't think you'll ever get it. It's just too far away. There's too many things that can go wrong. You're never going to be happy. Misery is just the nature of life. And of course, that's supposed to help you awaken, to spiritual life. But when you're deep in the mode of ignorance and just trying to kill the pain and stuff, it's hard to understand that. How do you understand your spirit? This is why the power of bhakti is so important. That we have such powerful interfaces with Krishna. The holy name and prasadam, that even people in the deep mode of ignorance, they take prasadam. I had a friend when I was in college that I brought to the little preaching center we had on the university campus, and he was at that time was seriously under the thrall of alcoholism. He really had a bad drinking problem, and so mode of ignorance was definitely quite prominent in him. He was otherwise a pretty intelligent guy, but he was really really in a bad way. And he chanted and listened to the talk and things, and took prasadam, and when he finished the prasadam, he just looked at me and he said, "I swear to you that there's something in this food. They put something in this food because I'm just so happy." So the power of bhakti, is something that can allow Krishna to even be revealed to people in deep, dark, depressive, low energy mode of ignorance people. And for them, it's binding because they just can't make any effort. Right? You're stuck. You're stagnated. So mode of goodness, it's a little binding because of your feeling of contentment and maybe a little superiority. You think things are fine. Mode of passion, you just hoping for that time when the happiness is going to happen. The next episode of happiness. You don't want it to be over until you can finally have your plans come to fruition. And then the mode of ignorance, you're just, Prabhupada says, helpless, happy, active, and helpless. You just can't do anything for yourself. Almost everything you do is wrong. You can't understand anything very well because you're just overwhelmed by your misery. You can't connect with others. You just if you can use people, you'll use them. It's almost a solipsism where you're the only one in existence because you're just mired in your own misery. It's just so hard to make any kind of progress in any way. And then our last verse for today was verse 13. Where there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Kuru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested. So these are the reactions when we're in those particular modes and associated with them. We want to be associated with them, guna sangasya, and these things are arising out of them, and keeping us tightly connected. And especially with the passion and ignorance, very tightly connected. There's some hope for the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada says, when there is no illumination, knowledge is absent. One in the mode of ignorance does not work by a regulative principle. He wants to act whimsically for no purpose. There's lots of anger and things in there. So there's this frustration of not being happy and having no hope. Even though he has the capacity to work, he makes no endeavor. This is called illusion. Although consciousness is going on, life is inactive. these are the symptoms of one in the mode of ignorance. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, absence of discrimination, accepting sound and other sense objects not approved by the scriptures, aprakashaha, absence of all effort, apravrittihi, inattention, says, for example, conviction that one does not possess an object even when holding it in one's hands, pramadaha. So now we're going to this is getting close to more the madness side of thing rather than inattention, right? And absorption in the wrong or false, moha, appear within the increase of tamas. Somebody in tamas, they said that, somebody in the mode of goodness knows right from wrong. Somebody in the mode of passion, they generally know right from wrong, but sometimes they have this conflict of interest that makes them want to bend the rules or find rationalizations for breaking the rules. So sometimes they act properly and sometimes they don't. And then in the mode of ignorance, just everything is, you just are clueless. You're just acting to find any kind of joy, any kind of short-term sort of thing to make yourself happy, to try to kill the pain of existence. And you just don't have the energy or the will or anything to try to worry about what's right and what's wrong. What's right is somehow to kill the pain, and what's wrong is to not do it. And rules and regulations and proper procedures and all these things just aren't part of your world. You tend to act improperly with a high level of predictability. So here we've gotten some idea then now of when the 13th chapter said where we have this sangasya, guna sangasya, we're connected with the modes, and that's how our material lives go on and on through many, many births. Now we have an idea of what those qualities are like, how they're grouped together in these kind of, there's certain things that go together, understandings and psychology, and sort of little, discrete little packets that they come in, these qualities, and how they're keeping us connected, what holds us to them, and why we keep taking birth after birth. Because as I said, we really voluntarily associate with them on one level. We're not connected at all. And what happens from them, how you end up. You see that they're self-reinforcing. If you're living in the mode of goodness, it tends to promote the mode of goodness. If you're doing things in the mode of passion, you tend to, increase that, and ignorance increases ignorance. So especially for the lower ones, it can be very dangerous to get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And at least the mode of goodness is that there's some understanding of yourself as a spiritual person. There's some, that one has a lot of self-control. In the mode of passion, there's just, so little self-control. In the mode of goodness, you can do what you want to do what you should do. One thing I think we can take a look at ourselves in our Krishna consciousness. We have this, we've made this decision to serve Krishna, and we want to do it. But we don't always do it as much as we want or as well as we want. And we have that strange thing of not being able to do what you want to do. This is why, Prabhupada talks about, he calls about the 4 regulative principles of freedom, which sounds just, contradictory. It sounds like an oxymoron, that you have regulative principles that produce freedom. But I think when you understand how these, especially the lower modes of nature work, that there's no freedom. Someone in the mode of passion, if they have those two things, they're unhappy, but they think they can get it. They're just driven. They just want to taste it. They want to, experience that happiness that they're working towards. Can't stop it. Some in ignorance, it's just painful, and you can't get out of it. So it's just such a difficult situation. Where's the freedom? At least in the mode of goodness, you can consider what's right. You can see things objectively. And you can do what you want to do. You're not overwhelmed by your desires, not overwhelmed by sadness and misery. So by trying to cultivate that, there's a chance, to have more freedom, actually. The regulative principles of freedom. We think, being free is doing what we want to do, but why do we want to do what we want to do? What's controlling that? It's usually too often passion and ignorance. Anyway, so the next time we'll see a little bit more about this, about the effects of them, and then we'll talk about how to get free of them. The crucial part is coming in the conclusion of the chapter. So we'll hear a little bit more detail about how we're affected, what happens to us, what kind of births we get when we have a preponderance of one mode or the other. Right, the births are going on, but what kind of birth do you get? They're related. And a bit more about the effects, what action in them, when we act in those particular ways, what that produces. And by the time we can conclude that, it will be even more clear than it is now that it is in our best interest by far to try to get out of them. we want to sever this connection. And it's not healthy. It's not helping us out. And then Krishna will tell us how we can do it at the very end. So it's worthwhile. And so we'll see you again next week, and we'll discuss that. Finish this chapter 14. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.